Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're halfway through our Pain Points week, and the week in which we're aiming to address some of the most important issues facing hospitality in March 2022 at 10 a.m. every morning. I'm Jane Pendlebury, CEO of HOSPA, and you're very welcome here today. I'm delighted to be joined by Kees van Donk. Many of you will remember him from his entertaining speaker slots at HOSPACE. And today's issue is learning about how we can use technology to support our teams and make life easier for guests. The staff shortage is well documented, so I think we're all grateful for anything that helps address the ongoing problem. We're here for 30 minutes each day this week, so I shall just hand over to Kees to say hello, and then we'll get going with some questions. Please do ask questions if you'd like to, either in the chat or in the Q&A area, and we'll address as many as we can in the half hour. Thanks, Kees.
Well, Jane, many thanks for the kind introduction, and audience. Again, it's a pleasure meeting and addressing you this time, albeit in a virtual mode. And indeed, let's say, following the, I must say, quite enthusiastic response that I had during my last HOSPACE presentation, I thought it would be good now to come up with some more concrete examples of, let's say, how technology, I wouldn't say necessarily solve the staff shortage issue, but, and I'll come to that in a bit, that's a bigger picture, but definitely how technology can solve the results of having not enough staff in your hotels, you know, to either clean the rooms or working in front office. So with that, would you allow me, and even if you don't, you know, I probably will do it anyway, would you allow me to have a short introduction, what I would like to discuss? Jane, is that okay with you?
Please go ahead.
Okay, well, looking at the, and I'm not focused on the UK hospitality market. Let me start by saying I'm not saying to disappoint you, but let's make it very clear what technology cannot solve. I think that's also quite important to, let's say, make the discussion point a bit more focused, is that if you look at UK hospitality and the people who have worked in there are some elements that technology cannot solve. I think the first one is, let's say, the social cultural aspect, which I'll come to back in a minute. And the second one is, let's say, legal / Brexit / pay rates. But let's start with the first one. If I look to, let's say, the UK population as such, and if I would, let's say, whether it's going to college, going to university, or even have some kind of a degree, hospitality is probably for the wrong reasons, but hospitality is not seen as, let's say, as a career path, and where, you know, if you have a degree in whatever sector that you might want to go into, which, as we all know, at least the people on this audience, in this webinar, is utterly stupid. Because if there's one industry where you can grow up rapidly fast, where you can have a lot of responsibility, where you are empowered to take decisions, where you have a very interesting combination of, sorry, I start with my first love, with technology, people, staff, customers, and finance, it is indeed hospitality. But this is not the topic of today, and we cannot solve that if UK hospitality, and I must say you have fantastic leadership within the associations, really want to solve and address this. That is for the long run. That is not for today or for tomorrow. That will probably take 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And one of the reasons being is, and now I'll come to my second point, is that due to, let's call it Brexit, suddenly you saw a massive outflux of, let's say, people coming from Europe, and most likely not from my country, but from other parts, more like, say, Eastern Europe or Southern Europe, who, let's say, did the real work, if I may say so. They cleaned your rooms. They worked in the front office. They did the engineering. They were the porters. And not only were they doing this, but after Brexit, were they still allowed? Now, I know that there have been discussions, and probably also some law passed, that, let's say, temporarily visas for 3 months and 6 months, etc., have been offered. Now, imagine you are a young woman out of Bulgaria, with 23, and then you are invited to come to work for 3 to 6 months. Is that an appealing offer? Let's be honest, it is not. It is not. And then on top of that, the wages which are still being paid in hospitality, also in central London, where living itself is, I wouldn't call into the London grad discussion, you know, all the influx of other pieces of money is let's say, almost not, say, you can't live there for a salary if you are working in hospitality. So if you combine all that, that's also for the long run. So I will not discuss again the cultural aspects. I will not discuss the social Brexit and payroll aspect. That is something for you to solve. But what can technology then do solve? Now, looking at the biggest pain in UK hospitality, and not only within the M25, but I'm also hearing, let's say, a lot of, I wouldn't call it agonizing, but a lot of pain points, as this is the Masterclass Pain Week, coming out of Manchester, coming out of Birmingham, even of, let's say, north of the borders, you know, Glasgow and Edinburgh. There are also, and there are two massive, let's say, departments with the industry which are suffering the, let's say, the biggest. That is housekeeping, and that is the front office. F&B, for some reason or other, doesn't seem to be, at least that's what I'm hearing, affected that much. Maybe because of the, let's say, of the tips. I think, and we see that across Europe as well, and I'm taking UK, not a part of Europe, but say continental Europe, due to COVID, guests have not been able to go out to a certain extent. So people, which is good for the restaurant business, if you have staff, people do want to spend money and they are okay to tip people. So I think if you are a 3, 4, 5-star hotel with an F&B outlet, if you play this intelligently, you can still find staff out there. So let's focus on the 2 pain points, housekeeping and front office reception. Now, housekeeping, I have again bad news for you. I do not necessarily believe in technology, let's say, robots making beds, robots cleaning bathrooms. Well, if you look at in that sense, I always say, Jane and I have the same color of hair. It's ultra blonde. And in that sense, you know, I think for housekeeping, you still need staff. Let's talk about, and let's focus on the front office environment, because there, I do believe now stronger. I'm convinced technology can help. I was very positively surprised this morning, in fact, less than half an hour ago, that a fantastic organization, brilliantly led by Jane, HOSPA, they just published, let's say, a new report on the fact that business travel is, let's say, is coming back, which is good, because business travel, let's say, on average, not always, but on average, they reserve on a much shorter time frame. That means you as a hotel can have the opportunity to, I wouldn't call it yield management yet, revenue management yet, but at least you have the opportunity to protect your prices. And also businessmen coming back, then finally, my friends, start fighting the fight and also win the battles with those horrific, dreadful, agonizing OTAs. So you can sell direct at a higher rate with a higher margin. Now, and if the business guests then come to your hotel, don't forget this business traveler hasn't traveled for 24 months, 26 months, maybe longer on average, and then he's coming to the hotel. And over the last 2 years, he or she has been on these sessions for, let's say, 3-4 times a day, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Teams, whether it's WebEx, well, that's almost gone now, or whether other type of pieces. But the business travel is, not only is he coming back to your hotels, to your properties, but he's also very, let's say, okay to use digital communication solutions. So if there is ever an opportunity to introduce and implement digital transformation solutions into your properties, it is now, not tomorrow. It is now. So what type of technology are we then talking about? And again, I do not have a magic wand that you suddenly are filled with staff who wants to apply to your hotel. No, I want to discuss with you and have an opportunity to share technology which can take away this pain. That instead of, let's say, I think we all know hotels in central London, large hotels, 300, 400, 500 rooms and above, who only operate on a 50 to 60% ratio, because they do not have staff either to clean the rooms or, let's say, to fill the front office. And that's what we have. We introduced, for those who joined me at my HOSPA session, where I introduced the NEC Smart Check-in Kiosk. I'll repeat it again today. The NEC Smart Check-in Kiosk takes away, let's say, and this is indeed, this time it is a double-edged sword, because, and allow me to look at it from a guest perspective first, and not on your pain point, although we try to pinpoint the hotels today. But hey, if the guest is happy, they tend to like your hotel as well. So a guest comes into the hotel, and instead of being confronted with, which I find personally the most stupid question in our industry, have you stayed with us before, Mr. Van Donk? Yes, this is only my 13th time, so thank you very much for the fantastic guest recognition. No, he or she is in control of his entire checking experience through, let's say, the NEC Smart Check-in Kiosk, or as HOSPA is neutral, I should say, other alternative competitive solutions. Instead of waiting in queue for 8, 10, 12, 30, if the business will increase. I know hotels in central London where, let's say, on a check-in process between 6 and 8 p.m. at night can take up until between 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Then he or she is in full control, not only of his check-in and check-out process. He or she can check the, let's say the hotel can check the identity of the guest. The system can give the opportunity to up and cross-sell. And now it becomes interesting. The experience that we have with our system, not in the UK, but in other parts of the world, is that guests are more likely to accept up and cross-sell offers when they are in control of the process than when it's being offered by the front of, let's say, by a clerk in the front office. So all good elements from a guest perspective. He is in control, depending on the guest flow. You know, do you or do you not have a loyalty program, which is also interesting for hotels. What type of reservation are we talking about? Is it prepaid, half paid, postpaid? A lot of hotels these days talk about mobile key, which is interesting, which is absolutely fantastic. But think of a hotel with 400 rooms who want to go mobile key, and the cost you need to incur, let's say, by changing all the door locks. So, you know, mobility is nice, but I'm a big believer is that these check-in, check-out solutions will be hybrid. A lot of things will happen on the mobile of the guest, you know, like maybe room selection, identification, but maybe the final payment. And don't forget, hey, you need to hand out a key card, which probably is a physical process as such. Well, there, a kiosk is a fantastic tool. So the check-in process, and as you will understand, most likely also the check-out process, will be very much done based on, let's say, based on the preference of the guest. Having said that, we are a big believer in hybrid, as I already said. So we are not here, the opposite. We are not here to, let's say, get rid of, delete, whatever you want to call it, of the front office staff. No, it's the opposite. We want to give the guest the option. So from a guest perspective, we only see benefits if it makes sense, because if he or she doesn't like it, and let's be honest, the leisure guests probably would like to have a reception with men's staff, but the business guest, as HOSPA is just releasing, is getting back. Now, from a hotel perspective, again, I cannot solve, maybe collectively we can, but that will take time, both the cultural, the social, and the Brexit and the payroll issues from staff. But having the business pain that you do not have enough staff in your front office to take care of this demanding guest, I can solve by making use of technology to assure that the guests who want to make use of technology, who already are making use of apps, or no, sorry, that's the wrong word, because as we all know, apps are dead. Guests do not want to download apps. So we're talking about a dynamic web solution, web environment. An example of it, of my great friend, John Ower from Tiger TMS, with a fantastic Tiger Eye Portal solution. So think of Tiger Eye Portal with the NEC Smart Check-in Kiosk. It's a marriage made in heaven. So we are convinced that by using make of technology, no, we cannot solve the staff shortage in your hotels, but we can take away the business pain by offering guests the opportunity to make use of a guest engagement solution, being either physical or digital, in the way that he or she prefers. Thank
You
you.
made a lot of points there, Case. A lot of I kept quiet, but a few really interesting things that you said there. As HOSPA, with the staffing issue, and we can't solve that overnight, we're trying very hard by running two separate campaigns. One is share your success, so it's
Yes,
people
I've seen
have
it.
been successful, just saying how great it is. And the other, why I love hospitality. So they are our day-to-day stepping stones to try and encourage people into the industry, because those of us that are lucky to have probably fallen into it, it's not often that it doesn't, or not as often as it should be, a choice. People end up in it. I think it's our duty to share that with anybody and everybody, and if we can go back to our own schools, colleges, old workplaces, wherever it might be, just spread the word about it's not all about long hours, it's not all about hot sweaty kitchens or whatever it might be, but there's a lot of fulfillment, there's a lot of career, as you say, fast development, there's a lot to be said for it. But if we stick on topic, you mentioned also culture there, and our pain point webinar masterclass yesterday was about sustainability, and we were saying how that's got to be ingrained into the culture. And I like the fact that you made the point about choice, whether people use these kiosks or not. And that's got to be, different hotels are going to have different attitudes towards that. And you said leisure guests probably would prefer to speak to a person, business guests prefer potentially to interact.
Is my naive guesstimation, but that's
it's a sweeping statement, isn't it? But
yes.
There are always exceptions.
Yes.
And my belief is that in the pandemic, a lot of technology was accelerated. There were more bits of technology put in, whether it was automating back office or the kiosk type environment, mobile key you mentioned, all of those bits and pieces. I love to tell the story about it was Andy Evers from Red Carnation talked about the wine list being on a leather-bound wine list, and that had to go onto a piece of technology so that people in the hotel didn't have to touch the wine list at the peak of the pandemic. And he felt that was a real loss for a hotel like Red Carnation, because it's all about the theatre, the drama, the presenting. But I think the theory is there for them that they're going to have the choice. People can still use the big leather-bound wine list to choose their wine, or if they just want to pick up their phone and make a quick, say, I'll have bin number 54. So it is about choice. And I think that's very relevant for the kiosk solution, because if you take a five-star hotel, Park Lane, wherever it might be, or city centre anywhere in the world, and compare that with a budget hotel, there's going to be very different attitudes, not just from the guests, but also from the staff. It must be a very different approach that you speak to these hoteliers.
Well, and this is an interesting comment, because you mentioned let's say star rating. I would say I'm not saying we see hotels going away from staff, but it's more about experience environments. And that's not English, but let me try to explain what I mean. Why is, for example, as I'm sure you know, Accor recently acquired Ennismore. You know, to invest heavily in lifestyle. Let me give you two examples of that's what's happening. A classic Marriott 5-star environment is Ritz-Carlton. Now, I would love it, but I do not foresee installing in a Ritz-Carlton, or for that matter in a Four Seasons, or for that matter in a Mandarin Oriental, I'll be beloved NEC Smart Check-in kiosk. Yet that will not happen. But on the other side, another 5-star brand of environment within Marriott is Edition, which is a lifestyle brand. And then I'm not talking about the products and the services being offered, but I'm talking about the guest profile of an Edition compared to a guest profile of a Ritz-Carlton is completely different. That means I wouldn't say that, you know, that a guest profile of Edition, and I'm highly over exaggerating, is a millennial. He earns more than £80,000. He likes to travel. He's a cosmopolitan. He's a how do you call it these days? He's a digital nomad. That's an Edition guest. For this type of guest, although it might be in a 5-star environment, a kiosk is a perfect solution, because they are okay, you know, with having their smartphones on 27 hours per day and communicating in that way. Don't only think of what type of hotel, but please think of what type of guests you can serve for your property moving forward. That's something we definitely need to learn as well. Hilton is moving away from the star rating. They are moving away from the star rating. So think of your guest. What does your guest need in combination with how can I solve my staff shortage?
Yeah,
Sorry for the intervention.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there are lots of things, and there will always be exceptions, won't there? There will be people that just aren't used to digital at all. They don't travel, they don't do it at airports. They're just thought of checking in digitally wouldn't appeal to them.
True.
But there's a lot of other people who travel a lot, and that's the only way now, really, at airports, isn't it? You have to do it digitally. Well, very little choice.
Let's say I hate the word Uberization of the travel, of let's say of the travel experience, but this is what we're talking about. And I'm convinced that let's say, if we wouldn't have COVID, we would have happened, because, let's say, in our total smart hospitality solution portfolio, I always have a section which is called Hospitality 2.0, which was like, if not today, then maybe not the day after tomorrow, but it'll become. COVID has driven this, because clearly this has led, let's say, we didn't anticipate the staff shortage in the UK, to be honest, but the other elements of guests wanting to engage in a digital way, business travel bouncing back, we knew that would happen. So we see a lot of, let's put it like this, hospitality technology has become much more dynamic than it was a couple of years ago.
I still don't think we're leading the way, though, compared to other industries. There's a lot of other industries that are a step ahead of us. I've got a question here, Case. Let me just, it's quite a long one, so I'm going to read it live. So let's go for it, see what it says. Airports and hospitality share the bulk of clients, meaning a number of guests arriving at the property would have travelled via an airport. Airports today are making heavy use of technology, especially self-service check-in and immigration process, duty-free purchases, payments. This shows that people are making use of technology, which can be adopted too in the hospitality environment. Do you see this replicating itself in the various departments of a hotel? So maybe just not just for check-in. Are there other areas where kiosks can be implemented?
My classic answer then would always be, how is your German? Because if you say, well, my German is fluent, then I would say my answer would be jein. As in, it's a gray answer, in the sense that we see, let's say, smaller version of kiosk entering in an F&B environment, but where we do see let's say, a takeoff of, let's say, digital engagement solution is indeed the topic of today in the staff, let's say, in the staff area. It's because people, especially the, let's say, in the operational departments, they work in different shifts. So it also means larger hotels in London can have 300, 400, 500, 600 staff, if it makes sense. So they're let's say, normally they do not enter to the front door. So there we see, I wouldn't say kiosk, with elements like entrance and access, front office type of solutions, in combination with taking out another nice piece of NEC technology from the rucksack, facial recognition. Is Mr. John Williams entering? Let's say it is his card to have access to the staff lockers room, but isn't Mr. Williams? There we see it taking up. So the answer is yes, what I see and I know, but in a different format. I wouldn't, may sound strange from a technology sales guy, don't use technology for technology's sake. If a guest is in a hotel, let's say a services type of environment, don't confront him too much, because he or she, they're still there for a reason.
Absolutely. Okay, I do have another question here. I think it's from a hotelier. As a smaller leisure property with an owner focused on accolades and improvements, do you see the AA warming to technology or making ways for a more modern award system?
It's a very interesting question. Well, in theory, one should not exclude the other, but I think it's easier. It would be easier to focus on the second one. I think that's without, let's say, I don't think have any influence on that one, but I think getting the AA more on the side of technology is might be a bit of a challenge. I think maybe it's an idea to focus on the second one. What's your view on this, Jane?
I think that people don't pay so much attention to star ratings anymore anyway.
Yeah, as we discussed, it's
yeah, very different. I have got a question. You mentioned facial recognition there. Is that integral to, is that part of your kiosk solution? Is that, or can it be? How useful is that? And I've heard in the past that it's very useful for spotting international criminals, potentially terrorists and that sort of thing.
Well,
We've got a few minutes left if you want to make a comment on that.
Well, Ken, the answer is yein. So it depends on the need. It depends on, let me give an example. We are currently having interesting discussions with the government of Dubai. Now, I'm utterly and totally convinced that 104% of the audience of this morning, they've been to Dubai, and they all know that when you check in a hotel in Dubai, and that you also have had an experience of checking in a hotel in Dubai, all flights arrive at midnight. So between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. in hotels in Dubai, pre-COVID that is, it's hell on earth, you know, because everybody had a manual check-in, and you all need to hand out your passport. And the reason why, I'm not sure if many of you know that the moment that your passport is being checked, there's a bespoke VPN connection directly to Dubai CID to check that Jane is Jane and case is case. Now, that's a manual process. Think of the implementing that in a physical process or in a digital process. That means you can still, and we have integrated into our kiosk a very nice, let's say, document scanner, passport, driving license, whatever. But how do we then know that Jane is Jane holding their passport or case is case? Then we can combine it, because integrated into our solution is a camera with a piece of facial technology, but it's a face match. So we check if Jane, the photo of Jane in a passport, is the same Jane as the photo which is being taken. If it's a yes, the photo is directly deleted, coming back to Europe, GDPR, etc., etc. But we still can check and verify back to Dubai CID, or moving forward in the UK, because I'm utterly, totally convinced that the rules and regulation of UK government and UK police, it's not, the question is not if, but when. Also, not only for international passengers, as you know, but also for UK residents. Is Jane, who's handing out the passport, also Jane? So we see a lot of things coming there together. So to answer your question, yes, it's possible, but it's not compulsory. Depending on the country, depending on the configuration, we can either deploy or not deploy and combine it with facial recognition.
And how accurate would you say facial recognition is? I mean, I think if I looked at my passport photo, it's a few years old now. Would that?
No. Let's say with the current technology, and again, I shouldn't boast too much about NEC, but NIST test in the Americas, you know, facial recognition is about two elements. It's speed, so very fast, and accuracy, very good. I think we are. No, I know we are the best of the best of the best. And also, don't forget, we come from Japan, so also with the Middle East, it's facial technology. What about niqabs and burqas? All those elements are getting into play.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I think we've pretty much come to the end of our time. There doesn't seem to be any further questions, but that was a very interesting very fast whiz through lots of things. We touched on culture, we touched on, well, ended on facial recognition, but we did everything in between the campaigns. We talked about tips, we talked about staffing. I think we even talked about supply chain. So a lot of things going on. And that's why we love hospitality, isn't it? It's no day is the same, and there's lots of different things. So brilliant. Thank you, Kees, very much for your time today and your entertaining presentations as ever, and informative today, and hopefully has created some queries and some questions and some chat that we will follow up after this event. This has been recorded. It will be recorded, as are all the masterclasses this week, and we will have them available to view on the website later this week, along with some of the best bits as well. If you do have any questions, anybody listening in today that haven't already been asked, please do send them either directly to Kees or to me, and we will do our best to answer those. And finally, please do register and tune in again tomorrow morning. I'll be talking to David Barrett from PIC-PR, and he will be sharing his wisdom and opinions on all things marketing and how to enhance guest engagement and hopefully thereby increasing guest spend. We've got some lovely thank yous here from people coming in, so lots of thanks there. So, and hello from people as well. I'll let you know who all those were, Kees. But okay. Thank you all for listening, and we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Speak to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.